RPGs can provide some brilliant escapism. You're telling me that I can have 5 or more mates do precisely one cool move without blowing my knees out, and also I get to look at Lulu for 50 hours without it being weird? Hell yeah, brother. But RPGs can also make you confront some rather dark themes. Howdy sports fans, it's Jimmy, and if you want to fill your dark soul with light, these grim RPGs will do the trick. I just wanted to quickly shout out Sweet Home and Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War. They were on our dark and disturbing SNES games, and you can watch that hither or down, sir. Right, so let's look at one RPG series that's properly been left in the shadows. Thanks to an unfortunate release date leaving it overshadowed by Final Fantasy X, Shadow Hearts is one of those PS2 RPGs forgotten by time, though it's at least developed a cult following. It's a sequel of sorts to the PS1's Kudelka, but while Kudelka is set in the confines of a mansion, Shadow Hearts leaves the constricted setting behind for an alternate history story spread across China and Europe, complete with Lovecraft-tinged loveliness. Our protagonist is a man who can absorb and transform into the monsters he kills. He's also not exactly a sociable type, and unfortunately for him, he's got a voice in his head compelling him to board a specific train to meet and then protect an exorcist named Alice. It's like your average trip to Colwyn Bay. Aside from its judgment ring and sanity system adding a few twists, the game's combat is on the more traditional side. What really sells the game is its unique atmosphere and the monster designs you encounter. These Lovecraftian horrors were deliberately given stiff and unnatural animation to really help lean into that horror vibe. We did actually get 2 more Shadow Hearts games, including Covenant, which genuinely is one of the best RPGs on the PlayStation 2. We also got Shadow Hearts from the New World, which absolutely tried to confuse people waiting for a new Kingdom Hearts game, but it didn't work and the franchise died. Oops. Do you have a craving for more abominations, more depraved beasties than a CEX when it's time to trade in that year's FIFA game? Check a look at this next dark RPG. Inspired by Sweet Home, this RPG Maker horror made its debut earlier this year after just 5 months of development following it being in a game jam. Sometimes all you need is a good idea and horrors beyond comprehension to make a big splash. Look Outside is an RPG set entirely in the confines of an apartment building. You are Sam, an unremarkable tenant who wakes up one day with a strange urge to look outside. Fortunately for him, a strange neighbour stops him from doing so, because something is going on outside, and while it'll all be over in 15 days, the people unfortunate enough to look outside have all mutated into all manner of horrific creatures. Imagine Bird Box meets Sweet Home, the other one, and you have the right idea. You'll explore the apartment, fighting off monsters, scavenging for items, and potentially forming social relationships with the still sane inhabitants. Sam will also need to keep an eye on things like his hunger, cleanliness, and weapon durability, though most of that does kind of fade into the background kind of quickly. You'll also be able to recruit a whole variety of party members who come knocking at your door. Ignore the fact that they're all a bit wrong. Characters growing more than one too many eyes or limbs is a recurring theme in Look Outside, but also only the tip of the iceberg of what lies in store in the apartment building. Can we even show some of this? Okay, quickly, here's Stretch Face. Yep, that's Stretchy McStretch Face, alright. I blasted through this one earlier in 2025 and I had a great, greasy, kind of wet and damp time. I really would recommend that you check it out. It should be near the top of your playlist too. Probably the greatest game franchise spun off from a really weird ending in a forgotten hack-and-slash series with dragons ever made, right? In the Western version of Nier, you play as a father working to care for his ailing daughter Yona, or in the Japanese version, a brother trying to care for his sister. Ultimately though, you're not having a cheery time with either game. Whichever version you play, the medieval fantasy world is one in decline, with its people under threat from creatures known as Shades. When the protagonist comes across a magical book known as Grimoire Vice, he sets off on a journey to find a cure for Yona's illness while battling the Shades. Things are never what they seem in Nier. On your first playthrough, it's already a rather bleak and somber RPG. But just like its predecessor Drakengard, that first playthrough is far from the end of the story. Nier incentivizes multiple repeat playthroughs by revealing more and more details, first by making the shades intelligible to the players, then by adding more cutscenes that further delve into the game's cast. It all culminates with the revelations that paint its supposed heroes in a much different light, and chances are, even if you haven't played the game, you might have heard of how its final ending— oops, let me just throw this thing up here. Right, you ready? Infamously asks the player to sacrifice everything, including their save data and the ability to reuse their chosen name for the protagonist on new save files. Yoko Taro saw 9/11 and the War on Terror as tragedies where both sides believed they were doing the right thing, and that idea's influences can be seen all throughout Nier. Yes, the game does feature RPG tropes like friendship and the power derived from friendship, but it also makes it clear that sometimes what you do with that power may not be the right choice after all. That got a bit heavy by our standards, didn't it? Sorry about that. Sorry to drag you all down a little bit. Let's let me lighten things slightly. Just check the script. Okay, next one. Slavery, is it? Oh.
Through. Take this. Swallow blade. It's over. Rising wyvern. Slash.
For 300 years, the planet of Dana has been trapped under the rule of Breiner. No, not him, but a planet once thought to be the land of the divine and the afterlife. In truth, Breiner is home to an empire filled with advanced technology and dangerous bioweapons, with which they conquered Dana virtually overnight. While most other RPGs begin in a peaceful setting before ramping up the action, Tales of Arise instead opens with an incredibly oppressive atmosphere, one that shows an entire people trapped in slavery, with most being too weak and broken to survive, let alone think about mounting a resistance. Though a chance encounter leads to protagonist Alfon gaining the power and allies he needs to begin liberating the world, Tales of Arise makes it clear that the journey will be a long one. The damage that Breiner did to Dana is long-lasting, and even within the main party, it takes a lot of time and effort to overcome long-held prejudices. Killing a Renan Lord realistically doesn't solve everyone's problems overnight, in the same way that blowing up the Death Star didn't stop them from making another one. Twice. Arise calls attention to ideas like what it really means to be free and what happens when someone dedicates themselves to their ideals at the expense of all else, including morals. While this is still a Tales game through and through, complete with tropes like amnesiac heroes and budding romances, Tales of Arise is still a surprisingly grim and mature adventure. And if you're still itching for more dystopia in your JRPGs after this, Monolith Soft has you covered.
Here we go, guys.
Let's give him the usual, Noah.
We got the initiative. Nice one, Wamba. Come here. I got something for you.
While the Xenoblade games are ultimately optimistic experiences with uplifting endings, the journeys to get there are often filled with pain, anguish, Australian hatred, and heartbreak. Nowhere is that more apparent than in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, because while the previous entries ended on a hopeful note, somewhere along the line things have gone horribly wrong by the time this game begins. You don't need to spend much time to see just how dystopian the setting of Ionios is. I mean, it's inhabited by only 2 nations, both of which are composed entirely of soldiers. There are no civilians or non-combatants here. These soldiers are all born from machine pods, have artificially limited lifespans of only 10 years, and spend their whole lives fighting the opposing nation. And there are no real politics behind this war. Everyone is forced to fight just to steal the life force of their enemies to stop their own from running out, which would kill everyone stationed at a given colony. Survive the whole 10 years and the best you'll get is the equivalent of a state funeral, something that everyone had been mentally conditioned to anticipate and celebrate. And there's no cake. Yes, this may all be presented in a bright, modern anime art style, but look beneath the surface and you begin to realise how deep the dystopia goes. The main cast have all spent their lives doing nothing but fighting and know nothing else. Concepts that we take for granted, like growing our own food, falling in love, having children, playing Balatro for 9 hours straight, and growing old, are all utterly alien to these soldiers. While there's eventually a light at the end of the tunnel and the gang manage to use the 6 Stardew cards to win the day, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 stands as Monolith's darkest and most somber game since Xenosaga, and another Xeno game I'll get to soon. For those looking for something a bit more off-kilter though, you'll love this next one. You are the batter and your mission is to deep fry the world of its impurities. What does that mean? Well, for starters, travelling through a variety of different areas, all of them surreal, while killing spectres in classic turn-based combat. As it so happens, the zones that the batter is tasked with purifying are also each ruled over by zone guardians, who are making life miserable for the people living there, and taking them down is all part of the process. Things also get creepier as the story goes on, especially once you discover the truth of sugar, one of the game's 5 fundamental elements. The real kicker, of course, is what exactly happens when a zone is purified. The colour is completely drained from the world, NPCs are all gone, the music becomes more unsettling, and all enemies have been replaced by bizarre and extremely powerful demonic looking dolls known as secretaries. Your mission isn't exactly in the best interests of the inhabitants of Off. Think of haze but good, and for human consumption, though sadly sans any corn. The morality of the game's cast isn't cut and dry either, given that the zones are all ruled by tyrants, and the batter himself has so little backstory that his actions can ultimately be left up to interpretation. We're choosing to interpret a port of this next game happening in the next 10 years. Maybe. Even before he left Squaresoft to start Monolith Soft, Tetsuya Takahashi had ambition. What began as his and Soraya Saga's pitch for Final Fantasy VII became an entirely different beast, one filled with so much religious and philosophical content that all but one translator quit the project. Xenogears begins on well-worn ground. Protagonist Fei Fong Wong is an amnesiac painter and martial artist living in Leihan Village. It is long before the village is attacked by a group of giant mecha known as Gears, and when Fei attempts to hijack one to fight them off, a catastrophic loss of control destroys Leihan and kills many of its inhabitants. The ensuing epic dives deep into topics like split personalities, the effects of psychological trauma, false deities, and reincarnation, and that really is putting it as simply as I can. To top it all off, the world of Xenogears has already been through multiple apocalypses, most of them being in service of the ancient conspiracies running the show. Things get even worse by the end of the game, with humanity only barely being saved. It's all grim stuff, and that's without getting into the part of the game that's one big shout out to Soylent Green. Xenogears is a dense game, so much so that one playthrough may not be enough to fully understand it, and its willingness to dive so deep into its protagonist's psychology gives it an edge that most modern RPGs, even Xenoblade, find themselves a bit lacking. Shin. Most RPGs involve you saving the world. In Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, the world is destroyed in the first hour. Following an event known as the Conception, no, not that Conception, Nocturne takes place in the remains of Tokyo, now warped into a sphere surrounding a star known as Kagutsuchi. The protagonist, one of the few human survivors, winds up transformed into a half-demon and sets off to explore the demon-infested Vortex world in first-person dungeon crawling. In contrast to some of the other games in the series, Nocturne relies more heavily on its atmosphere than a dense story, and that means exploring warped, exotic environments, taking in Kazuma Kaniko's excellent demon designs, and surviving the challenging turn-based combats where exploiting weaknesses nets you extra turns. The Demi-Fiend will run across a few of his human friends who likewise survived the Conception, as well as the man who helped kickstart it, and all of them have their own extreme ideas on what society should become. The Demon-Fiend can support one of them at the cost of killing all of the others, or he can also reject them all to find his own path. Players who fulfill the right conditions can destroy the world altogether, bringing down the cycle of death and rebirth before challenging Lucifer himself for the right to become his champion in a war against God. So yeah, bright and breezy stuff, eh? For a different flavour of the post-apocalypse, this next game brings the pain like Brock Lesnar with male pattern baldness. Yeah, 100k hairline reveal. Not a moment sooner. There may not be any demons in this post-apocalyptic setting, but Lisa the Painful, the sequel to adventure game Lisa the First, is an even grittier experience. For starters, it's set in a world where all women have been killed by an event known as the Flash, which was somehow even more disastrous than this. As the game begins, our middle-aged protagonist Brad Armstrong makes a shocking discovery, a baby girl lying out in the wasteland. Given her status as the only woman in the world, Brad takes her in and raises her in secret, naming her Buddy. Unfortunately for the two of them, Buddy is eventually kidnapped, kicking off a journey to find and rescue her. The death of all women is far from the only problem, as the lawless wasteland is filled with dangerous warlords and people are hooked on a drug known as joy. Even if he can be accompanied by a wide variety of recruitable party members, Brad's journey won't be easy. Everyone except Brad is susceptible to permadeath, resources are scarce, characters can get addicted to joy complete with withdrawal symptoms, and even sleeping is dangerous because it runs the risk of getting poisoned or kidnapped. And throughout the game, Brad will be forced to make some pretty difficult choices. Lisa's bleak story gets even darker with its DLC expansion, Lisa the Joyful. As the finale for the overall story, it's got revelations that paint some of the painful plot points in an even darker light. While this bleak, borderline nihilistic narrative didn't land with some critics, fans found a lot to love with this indie classic. Still hungry for more dark RPGs? Fear not, we got ya. A lot of dungeon crawlers have difficult resource-oriented combat and a core gameplay loop that rewards patience and caution while also punishing recklessness. But while something like Etrian Odyssey is bright and colourful, Fear and Hunger will show you just how terrifying dungeon crawling can actually be. Getting your limbs chopped off is a pretty PG experience here, as there's no shortage of gruesome ways your journey can end. Adding to the misery is the gameplay itself, which is bone-crushingly difficult and borders on outright unfair. For starters, while battles are turn-based, they also involve a lot of dismemberment. Targeting enemy limbs to cripple them is vital to survive, especially when they can do the same to you. Get your own limbs chopped off and your stats will tank, and you'll also potentially lose the ability to wield certain weapons altogether. Even something as simple as saving the game is a matter of life or death, with the game's scant few save points requiring a coin flip. Lose the gamble and you'll be met with some rather unsavoury consequences, and yes, the mad bastard somehow made a save system even more masochistic than Donkey Kong Country 2's. In spite of, or perhaps because of, its brutal, unrelenting realism, Fear and Hunger has done quite well for itself on Steam, even managing to spawn a sequel in late 2022 that's even more horrible and grim. Yay! For the RPG fans whose preferred brand of horror is psychological instead of physical, our final game of the day is perhaps the heaviest of them all. Omori begins in an empty void known as White Space, home to the titular protagonist. Once Omori enters the world of Headspace though, things brighten up considerably as he meets his friends. And everything is fine and chill for the rest of the game. Nah, things go predictably alright. The world and inhabitants of White Space and Headspace are the dreams of Sunny, a teenage shut-in. It isn't always sunny in Sunny's head, as he's tormented by nightmarish hallucinations. His real-life friends aren't faring much better. Omori, for the most part, is a turn-based RPG with art and vibes that are evocative of classics like Earthbound and Undertale. But while those games are kinda more upbeat, irreverent affairs that bury most of their darkness, Omori weaves its heavy themes directly into the story itself. On the surface level, its combat places a big emphasis on characters' emotional states. There are 4 potential moods: neutral, happy, angry, and sad. The latter 3 all have various effects, including a rock-paper-scissors relationship that influences damage dealt. Of course, combat and exploring a vibrant dream world are only one part of the equation, and occasionally it all gives way for a deep exploration of its protagonist's psyche in a psychological horror setting, complete with some nightmarish imagery. It gets pretty weird. Although Omori has its fair share of jump scares, the real horror ultimately lies in the trauma its characters suffer from and the mental health issues they've developed as a result. This game isn't for the faint of heart, but those who play it will find it tugging at their heartstrings. Can I tug at your heartstrings and ask you to donate 1 watch of an outro to a YouTuber in need? Outro gang, do you want to know one of the least dark and disturbing RPGs? Is you guys, the really pretty cool guys. It was also really pretty cool are our members, who you can see on the screen here, and just for $1 or £1 a month they get access to free videos, early access, and the most valuable thing of all, the love and respect of a 33-year-old balding man. To prove you've been watching, let me know down below what the last Shadow Hearts game was called, and you could win a free Steam key. My voice is going all froggy and weird, I better go. It's been good to have you, I need to go back in the pond. Have a good one, Ribbit.